Good evening, everyone. My name's Damien Stewart. I'm here at Equestrian Queensland headquarters to conduct a webinar on conflict management, resolution and assertiveness. As we're going through, if you have any questions on the particular section that I'm talking about, please send them through to Christine and she'll let me know that they're there, and I can try to answer those as we go through. Hopefully we'll be about an hour, maybe a little bit more depending on how much I talk. But we're ready to get started. So today we're going to talk about conflict. We're going to define conflict. We're going to look at conflict management and resolution, conflict management styles, how we might engage the person we're in conflict with, communicating during conflict, looking at assertiveness, and then a little bit about how to move on from conflict once it's occurred. So the goal is hoped that by sharing conflict management, conflict resolution and assertiveness skills with you, you'll be more confident and comfortable in entering into uncomfortable situations in both your equestrian and private lives. And I think that's one of the things about sport psychology skills is they're not just for the sport that we're playing, but they also transfer to our life away from the sport that we're involved with as well.
Sorry, Damien, I'm just going to pause you there for a second.
Sure.
Can you just ask if their screen has changed, because mine is still stuck on the first one.
Can somebody please let Christine know if your screen has changed or has not changed for that matter? You mean the slides?
Yes.
Yeah. Is everybody seeing the slides move on?
First slide, yeah. So for some reason they're only seeing the first slide still.
Yeah.
We're having fun today.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Try that. There we go.
All good? Right, yeah. A few missteps along the way. So first of all, I'm going to look at defining conflict. I think that's very important to the way we work. Now I'm not clicking. My clicking's not working. Try that. There we go. There's three certainties in life, perhaps. Death, taxes, and conflict. No matter what we're doing, there's going to be conflict unless we live on a deserted island, most likely. So you kind of need to learn how to deal with conflict when it arises. So conflict is defined as a form of interaction between parties that differ in interest, perceptions, or preferences. Perhaps that perceptions is most important there. Also, a struggle or contest between people with opposing needs, ideas, beliefs, values, or goals, and often result because of a miscommunication between people with regard to these personal constructs. We'll look a little bit more about miscommunication later on in the webinar. Conflict has two dimensions. The first one is a content dimension, which is based on task, substantive issues-driven stuff. So moderate levels of content conflict where individuals disagree about how to solve an issue, a task, are beneficial as they stimulate discussion and debate, resulting in improved outcomes. The other one is a relational conflict about our emotions. So impedes optimal performance, loyalty, satisfaction, and commitment. Can also lead people to be irritable, negative, resentful, and suspicious. So if we're looking at these two, content is more about what the conflict is about, and relational tends to be about between people and how they feel about each other. So conflict may occur within a person, intrapersonal, trying to make a decision about something, who to support, which car to buy, do I do something, do I not do something, so we can have internal conflict. Between two people, which is probably the one that we're most familiar with, between members of a group, so, Queensland, within Queensland equestrian riders, within our own family, and between groups might be between, say, Equestrian Queensland and Equestrian Western Australia, or between one party over here and one party over there. So let's look a little bit at what leads to conflict. So conflict is likely to arise when there are philosophical and attitudinal differences to a thing or an issue. There is a misunderstanding about where we're coming from in regards to that issue. There are divergent goals. I'm trying to go this direction and someone else is trying to go that direction. The next one is where there are power imbalances. Someone is abusing their power or someone is not respecting the power of another. There is role conflict. This is my job, but I'm creeping over into somebody else's job. People or groups perceive that others have taken some action that has a negative impact on their interests. And obsessive passion that is greater than harmonious passion. So what we're talking about here is I want something far more for myself when I'm not actually thinking more about how I might act or react to fit in with others. So it's kind of the individualistic versus collectivist sort of I want what I want rather than worrying about what the group wants, and sometimes trying to fit in with the group can lead to less conflict. What I thought was interesting is just to go through that again, whereas perhaps you can see that within the causes of conflict also lie the clues to its resolution. So once again, if we're looking at philosophical or attitudinal differences between people that are leading to conflict, maybe trying to understand the other's philosophy or attitude or being able to explain ours a little bit better might be helpful in resolving that conflict. If there is a misunderstanding, what can we do to get some understanding and make sure that people do understand where we're coming from? There are divergent goals. Can we find a goal that suits both, or can we just agree to disagree that we're heading in different directions, we want different things? There are power imbalances, respecting the power that we have and potentially respecting the power that somebody else has. Role conflict, understanding what my role is and doing my role and allowing other people to do their roles and only help perhaps if we're asked. People or groups perceive that others have taken some action that has a negative impact on their interests. That one might be a little bit more tricky and cover it more as we go through the webinar. And of course, trying to think of not only the goals or what I'm trying to achieve, how will this affect others? Can I work with the group to perhaps achieve what I need to achieve? So conflict tends to come from an escalation. So conflicts escalate when defensive aggression by one group makes the other group suspicious and promotes counter-aggression. The initial group then responds with further aggression and so on. So maybe an example of this in the world at the moment is North Korea and the United States. One says something, the other one says something a little bit more strongly, the next one says something more strongly again, and all of a sudden we're starting to escalate up in our conflict where nobody's really concerned about backing down or thinking what might be better for both parties. The conflict escalates when each group responds with an ever-increasing cycle of defence and aggression. Defence and aggression. There are some benefits to conflict, though. Obviously, we all feel very uncomfortable when it comes to conflict, but there are some benefits. A couple of those is understanding. By coming to conflict, rather than sitting back and avoiding each other, by getting into conflict, it can create understanding between two parties. It can help us to learn to tolerate differences. Well, I still believe this and you still believe that. That's okay, and now I understand that you feel that way. We can learn from conflict, and hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about that as we go through the webinar. Personal group growth and development. Something's obviously not working if there's conflict, so how can we fix that and make things a little bit better? Diffusion of further conflict and more serious conflict. So getting in at the ground floor and dealing with a problem as it arises stops us from getting to something that might be catastrophic, like the US and North Korea, for example, down the track. Learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So a lot of the times, particularly in sport, we have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. We are going to get anxious when we perform. We are going to get anxious during conflict, and potentially the more comfortable we can get with conflict, the better we're going to be at dealing with it in the future. So starting to look at some conflict management and conflict resolution. So there are three ways to deal with conflict. One is to confront it, one is to manage it, and the other one is to ignore it completely. And we'll look at the benefits and the negatives of that as we go through. Not all conflict can be resolved, but learning how to manage conflict can decrease the odds of non-productive escalation, as we talked about in the slide before. So conflict management and conflict resolution are not the same thing. So the definition of conflict management is strategies employed to accommodate tensions, minimise the dysfunctions of conflict, and enhance learning and effectiveness of those involved. The aim is conflict management involves acquiring skills related to conflict resolution, self-awareness about conflict modes, conflict communication and skills, and establishing a structure of conflict in your environment. So conflict management is about managing the conflict, whereas conflict resolution is about ending or resolving the conflict. So management is we might not actually be able to end the conflict or stop the conflict, but we can manage it in a way that's non-destructive. So the aims of conflict resolution implies elimination or termination of the conflict. And the aim is to constructively resolve difficulties and optimise positive outcomes. Excuse me. So there's this thing called a contingency approach to conflict management, where there is no right or wrong way to manage the conflict. We balance the concerns of ourselves with the concerns of the other, and hopefully that the other is also balancing their concerns with our concerns as we go along. So at times conflict arises due to issues within policies, procedures and guidelines, the way we do things of an organisation. So let's have a look at how an organisation or even an event staff can work towards minimising conflict, because I understand a lot of you out there are event organisers and judges of equestrian, or dressage, I guess, particularly. So strategies for managing conflict in organisations. Some of the ways we can do that is through improving organisational practices, having special roles and structure within our organisation, confrontation techniques, how we actually do confrontation if we need it, and our styles for managing conflict in our organisation. So looking at improving organisational practices, establishing superordinate goals. So superordinate goals are, I've got a goal, you've got a goal, the judges have got a goal, the event organisers have got a goal, the participants have a goal. They're all different. How can we have a goal that overrides everybody and has a goal that everybody can attain or shoot for, strive for? So we all have one common thing in place that we can all go after, rather than arguing about our divergent goals. Reducing vagueness. Anytime anybody can not understand or pull apart a procedure or something that's happened, the more they have the chance of arguing. So the more we can reduce vagueness in something and make it more concrete, the more we'll avoid conflict. Minimising authority and domain-related disputes. This is about power, so trying to minimise the use of power or coming across other people, minimising other people's power, and undermining other people in front of important others. Improving policies, procedures and rules, which is probably straightforward there. Reappointing existing resources or adding new ones, or reapportioning, I should say. So maybe we need to have more experienced judges over here for this competition as compared to over there. Maybe organisers need to have more places where the dressages take place, more of the structures, etc. Maybe we need to have more food, more water, etc., etc. Maybe we need to be more available to people as we go along. Altering our communications. Are we communicating a little bit too straightforward? Do we need to put a little bit more emotion, a little bit more compassion into our communications? Do we need to be more clear, less vague in our communications? Movement of personnel. This probably goes back a little bit to the apportioning of existing resources. Changing reward systems. So perhaps we instead of punishing poor behaviour, we implement rewards for good behaviour, or vice versa for that matter. Develop fair standards and procedures for resolving conflict. So knowing that everybody knows what our conflict management policies and procedures are for resolving conflict if it arises. So looking at special roles and structures within organisations, initiate structural changes as required. Maybe we didn't set up our power systems correctly. Maybe we didn't apportion our staff correctly for the event. Create liaison functions. Can we have one person that people bring their complaints to or conflict to deal with the situation, rather than having the chance for people to go to 2 different, 3 different people to get some feedback on the same problem, and all of a sudden now we're all saying a different thing to the person and they've got a pretty good reason therefore to argue. Appoint an integrator to resolve conflict. So this is somebody who is good at resolving conflict. Maybe they're the ones that get put in charge of resolving conflicts. And once again, appointing a person to diffuse conflicts who possesses problem-solving skills and who is respected by all parties. So even if someone's coming in with a complaint, they at least respect the person enough to not escalate it further than it needs to. So when we do have to confront people, aim at finding a mutually acceptable and enduring solution through collaboration and compromise. Sometimes this is a little bit difficult when we do have the power and when we do have to enforce the rules, but as much as we possibly can, trying to collaborate and compromise. It involves amicably intercession, bargaining, negotiation and mediation based on the premise that there is a solution that can be accepted by all parties. And we are going to talk a little bit more about this as we go through. So a process of defining the problem, searching for alternatives, evaluating the alternatives, deciding by consensus and ultimately implementing the best alternative. And I've got a slide right at the end of the presentation that talks about decision making. That's based on what we've just seen there, the process, and I'll go through that a little bit later. So if we're looking at conflict management styles, I guess right here is not a bad place, Christine, to see if there's any questions on conflict and what conflict management is and conflict resolution is.
Yep, I was just to ask if anyone had any questions. Nothing through so far?
Nothing through? Okay, so I'll move forward unless any questions come through. So I'm going to look at the conflict management styles, and probably we might see a little bit of each of ourselves in some or a few of these as we go through. So there are 5 widely agreed upon conflict management styles. The 5 styles are mediated by 2 dimensions. The first dimension is by assertiveness, that is the extent to which an individual tries to satisfy their own concerns, and cooperativeness, the extent to which an individual attempts to satisfy the other's concerns when they're in conflict with them. The first one is what we call competing or forcing. This is both assertive and uncooperative because we're trying to get the person to do what we want them to do. It's characterised by trying to win at the other person's expense, appropriate when quick, decisive action is necessary or when the issue is vital and backing down is not an option. Forcing, using formal authority or other power you possess to satisfy your concerns without regard for the concerns of the party that you are in conflict with. This is potential. This is the potential for this is very high when we are in charge of something, when we are in a judging situation, or we are running an event. But when we come to competing or forcing, repair of the relationship might be necessary after having used one of these strategies. So there's some key actions if we are going to use forcing as a conflict management technique. First of all, when we're in conflict, we want to focus on the situation or the issue or the behaviour, rather than the behaviour of the person. I'll start that again. Focus on the situation, the issue or behaviour that we are pointing out rather than the person. So we don't want to get personal. We want to stick to the situation, what the issue is, or the behaviour that we're coming to the person to say, we need to fix that. So as soon as we start to get personal, that's where conflict really starts to wind up. Identify the reasons for your actions and be specific. Refer to the facts, refer to the results and observations. So trying to be as objective as we possibly can when we're in conflict with the other person. Describe the impact of the situation or the issue. Because you're not getting out of the way, other people can't drive their cars through. It would be a very simple example there. Be firm about what needs to happen. I'm very sorry that you feel that way, but I still need you to move your car, please. Thank you very much. Acknowledge the other person's position, but refrain from arguing. Thank you. I can see what you're saying to me is that you don't want to move your car. We don't need to get into an argument about that. It's just acknowledging the other person. Discuss ways to implement the required outcome. We'll work through how we might be able to solve the problem, and if the person can't come up with one themselves, perhaps we'll give one to them. Set an action plan and clarify accountability and consequences. So if this is something that needs ongoing attention, who's in charge? Who's accountable for what parts of solving the problem? If we're looking at perhaps something like a disaster relief, you can't solve it all yourself. We need to apportion responsibilities to different people in dealing with that conflict. And also giving consequences for people for if they don't follow through and do what's required of them. And also we might want to set a time limit for compliance. So somebody might say, I'll get back to you. Okay, when can I expect that you'll get back to me by, please? So we make sure that we're moving on and getting an end point and a resolution to our conflict. So the next conflict management style is accommodating. So this is the opposite of competing. It is unassertive, so not so much getting our own needs met, but very cooperative with the other person getting their needs met. So when an individual is accommodating, they neglect their concerns in order to satisfy those of the other party. It is useful when the issue is more important to the other person than to you. No point getting into an argument if we don't need to. When you're outmatched and losing, when it's just impossible to win, or when consideration of a better position is necessary. So we might need to accommodate to begin with to be able to get some space to be able to think about how we might actually want to respond in future, or come back to them and reopen the discussion. Compromising is another conflict management technique. At the midpoint for assertiveness and cooperative, it's a little bit assertiveness, it's a little bit cooperative. The objective is to find a mutually acceptable solution that satisfies all parties. This might mean splitting the difference, engaging in concessions, or seeking the middle ground. Trying to buy a car and we're $2,000 apart, maybe we meet in the middle somewhere. It's useful to achieve temporary settlements of outstanding issues or when goals are moderately important but not worth the disruption involved in using more assertive styles of conflict management. Avoiding is another conflict management technique. It's both unassertive and cooperative. So it does not address the conflict and may take the form of sidestepping, ignoring, or withdrawing from the conflict. It is appropriate when the issue is trivial, where you have no opportunity to satisfy your needs, or where deferral gives more time for a vital consideration, just as in the previous style. Collaborating for a conflict management style. So it's the opposite of avoiding and is both assertive and cooperative. When collaborating, individuals actively work with others to achieve a mutually acceptable solution. It's appropriate when the other party is willing to collaborate, where an integrative solution is necessary or the concerns of both parties are too important to be compromised. By being collaborative, an integrative solution might be reached where that benefits both sides. Integrative solutions force attention on interests rather than positions, and it develops rapport and trust between the conflicted parties. One study found that 50% of people in conflict did not realise when they had shared interests completely compatible with the other person, and 20% failed to reach agreement despite the interests being completely compatible. So we might think that it's got more to do with trying to be right or more about the person rather than the issue at hand. So, however, when collaboration would appear to be a win-win situation for everyone, however, collaborating can take time and might not suit the situation. If time is precious and you have the power to impose your will, forcing might be the most appropriate choice. So, looking at preferred conflict management styles, most people have a preference for up to 3 of the styles, maybe not all 5, but up to 3. All are appropriate in particular situations, so I guess it's learning about what is most appropriate to what situation. It is worth considering how to use non-preferred styles when circumstances demand their use. So maybe if we're in a conflict that doesn't mean that much to us, we might try the others that we don't usually use just to see how they go. So some considerations in choosing a conflict management strategy. Time pressure. If there were never any time pressures, collaboration might always be the best approach to use when we're looking at conflict management. Issue importance, the extent to which important priorities, principles, or values are involved in the conflict. Relationship importance, how important is it to maintain a close, mutually respectable relationship with this other person that we're in conflict with? Maybe if the relationship is more important than the issue, we might be able to tone it down or even let it go. If the relationship's not even that important, subsequently we might also push the point a little bit further. Relative power, how much power you have compared to how much power the other person has might help you choose which conflict management style you go with. Consequences, what are the consequences of engagement or non-engagement in the conflict? Are the consequences too important to let this conflict go, or is it too important to let it go because of what might happen based on getting into a conflict? So that's the end of that section. Were there any questions there?
Yes, we have a few questions. So I'll try and say these as overviews again so that people can hear, but you might just need to repeat them.
Okay.
So, first one, in the case of riders' parents, Emotion-based arguments are usually personally aimed at the coach, as the parents don't have the equestrian knowledge and the coach has to be firm. How can you diffuse competitive, argumentative parents?
The million-dollar question, and the very difficult one, no matter what sport we're involved in, unfortunately. As sometimes happens with me as a psychologist, a parent brings a child down and wants a particular outcome from the psychologist, but we sit with the client and the child has a completely different idea to their parents, so that is difficult. We have to rely on what we know, and getting back to a previous slide that talked about staying with the facts. The coach is getting the parent is getting emotional, maybe the child is getting emotional, but we probably don't want to enter into an emotional response. So we're professionals if we're a coach, particularly if we're getting paid. Sticking with the facts is very, very important. And once again, if we take into account, for example, politicians, when they're answering a question, they don't necessarily answer the question directly of what's asked of them, but they tend to answer the question that they want to answer. So they answer how they think it's best to respond. So hopefully that's helpful. So yeah, I think it's really about, no matter what kind of abuse is coming at us, we might have to completely de-escalate the situation and come back to a discussion with that parent at another time. But if we are able to stay in the discussion, I would highly recommend sticking to the point rather than the person, and try and take the emotion out of it.
Another question is how to deal with collectivist versus individualistic conflict.
Can we have a little more? Is there any more to that question? Can we get more about that question?
That's all at the moment, but maybe that person can add a little bit more. So while we're waiting for that, somebody's just sort of mentioned that with the forcing technique, as you've outlined, sometimes it's just really important to go back and smooth out some of the creases and just to make sure that you're positive in your mind that you've chosen the correct action that you are forcing.
Yes. That was more a statement than a question?
Yes,
yeah. Yep. And actually, I talk a little bit about how to debrief and move on from conflict later on, and that's a really good point, which we're definitely going to talk about as we get to the end. I'll try to get back to the question before about individualistic and collectivist. I probably was looking for a little bit of context to that one, maybe a specific example.
Okay, we've just got a little bit more come through.
Okay, yep.
For example, a single member that's pursuing their own agenda, but the rest of the club or the organising committee are too easygoing to say they don't agree. Okay.
That's probably a point where we need to become a little bit assertive, which we're going to talk about a little bit further on. Generally, I tend to look at a different type of psychology here, which is based in what's called social identity theory, which is the group tends to police their own. So if this is a person that's on the in-group, then it really will require, as a group, we become more powerful if we to stand up to this particular person and police what they're doing. It sounds like a very specific situation, but I think that it seems that the rest of the group, if they don't agree with what's going ahead, if we don't stand up and we don't sort of bring that person into line or express our concerns to that person, what information do they have or what cue do they have to change their behaviour? By letting the behaviour go, by ignoring the behaviour, we're saying to that person that your behaviour is okay, so keep doing it. So unless we pull them up on that in a respectful way, then they're probably going to continue that behaviour until such time as somebody does stand up to it. So for me, if we're kind of involved in this person taking their individualistic approach because we're not letting them know that their behaviour is not okay. Hopefully that's answered, but yeah, I think the main point there is that unless we do something, they're probably going to keep doing it. So we need to let them know how their behaviour is affecting us and letting them know that it's not okay, and then potentially that there will be consequences if they continue to act in the way that they are. How was that one, Christine? Do you think that one answered that question?
Yeah, we just got a response saying thank you, yes.
Yep, cool.
You can be assertive but kindly.
Yes, gentle, yes. And we're going to talk a little bit about assertiveness later on. And a lot of it, because I don't just do sports psychology, I do work in, mental health a lot of the time. And a lot of the time we do, including myself, get ourselves into situations of being disempowered, or somebody's treating us in a way that we don't like to be treated, because we don't say that it's not okay. So telling somebody that their behaviour is not okay and then holding them responsible for that is the only way we can really get somebody to change their behaviour, or we get some distance from them and tell them that we don't want to have any further interaction with them. So we need to be able to take action ourselves when someone's doing something to us we don't like. Any more questions there, Christine?
No, that seems to be it.
Okay. So we're going to look a little bit now at engaging the affected party, so the person that we are in conflict with, how we can engage with them in conflict. So just looking a little bit to begin with about how people respond to conflict. We're all of a sudden faced with an anxiety, a situation that creates anxiety. We start to go into the fight, flight or freeze now. It was always fight or flight, but now we have fight, flight or freeze. So people start to respond. One of the difficulties and one of the things we start to learn from neuropsychology is that when we get into conflict, when we're starting to, the more of the fight or flight response that we have, the more powerful it is. The adrenaline dumps, the blood starts to run from our head, which means we're not thinking clearly, and the blood's going to the major muscle groups so that we can either run like hell or fight like hell in the middle of an argument. So the other thing we start to learn is that in a conflict situation when our anxiety is high, is the thinking part of our brain, the reasoning part of our brain, the frontal lobe switches off and the survival part of our brain switches on. So if you start thinking about that when we're in conflict, people might not actually be thinking straight, particularly when their blood is up. So if we start to think about that a little bit, we might start to approach conflict in a different way. So we have the fight, we want to run away, flight, we want to run away from the conflict, or fight, we're ready to take on anyone who comes our way, or freeze is we don't know what to do, run or fight. So we get sort of this deer in a headlights sort of approach to things. So when in conflict, any situation in which we are performing a managerial role, conflict is going to be inevitable. If we're a judge or an event organiser, or if we're on a committee, which thank you for reminding me, there's some committee members out there as well, conflict is going to be inevitable and unavoidable. To different levels, of course. Hopefully the extreme levels of conflict are minimised, but it is going to be inevitable. So maybe having an acceptance of that is a good thing. So escalation is always preferred to de-escalation. So what we mean by this is going in easy, and then we can take it to the next level, and take it to the next level, and take it to the next level if we need to. But if we go in right up at this level, very hard to bring the argument back down to a minimal level. So we always want to go in calm and easy and have the option to escalate if we need to, rather than go in hard and have to de-escalate a conflict, which can be quite difficult. We want to separate the people from the problem, to stick to the issue, not the personality. So we've talked about this previously, and this is about all of a sudden we're not talking about the issue anymore. We're talking about the person, what they did last week, what clothes they're wearing, that they're horrible, these sorts of things. So we've got to stick to the problem, not the person. We want to deflect the muck and acknowledge and bring it back to the issue. So it's sort of like if someone's throwing things at us, maybe going back to that situation with the parents, with the coach, they're throwing things at us. We kind of got to learn a little bit of that martial arts of deflecting the muck, the stuff that's not helpful, acknowledging, hey, I can see you're really, really unhappy, or I can really feel that from you, and then bring it back to the issue. I can see you're upset about the way things are going, but I just want to explain to you what I'm seeing and where I'm coming from. So hopefully that answered that question back there a little bit better than what I did the first time. We want to evaluate the issues and options using objective data. Well, let me show you your daughter on the horse or your son on the horse. Let me show you what I'm seeing, and maybe we can work through it from there. So using objective data, not just I think or someone told me, we've got to look at the objective data, get the evidence. So when we're approaching the affected party, we might think of this concept of power with. So success is not achieved at the expense of the others, and the goal is to preserving the relationship. How can we work on this problem together? Let's work on this together. I think that if we combine our forces, we can get a resolution to the issue that we're discussing right now. Those who believe their goals to be cooperative have been found to work for mutually acceptable solutions. So I'm the coach, I'm trying to get the athlete to improve their performance. You're the parent, you want the athlete to improve their performance. So our goals, even though they're coming from different directions, are about the same. So maybe we can work on this together somehow. We want to preserve confidence, trust and respect, and optimise performance, development, and I've put the picture in the way, can't see the last word. But we want to preserve the respect between the two of us. We are going to get into an argument. We are going to disagree with each other. But how can we do that so that we can maintain the confidence we have in each other, keep the trust there, respect? We often hear people say that, that person, I didn't agree with their decision, but I respect their side of the story. So that's what we're really aiming for. And I think on that last one too, by the way, a lot of this is done in relationship building. So we go way, way, way back before there's even a conflict between two people or two parties. How can we develop the relationship between the two parties so that it's strong enough to survive when a conflict does come along? And often we talk about it in therapy, the relationship. You've got to build the relationship first before you can really start to challenge the client sitting in front of you. So recruiting the other into your side. So reconcile interests. You might choose to focus on interest and approach the dispute from a problem to be solved together. Okay, well, we're not agreeing on this. So how can we work together to try and solve this problem? Focus on the shared interest rather than looking at the thing we're in conflict is hey, we all want the athlete to improve here. Hey, I'm judging you and I've watched you over a number of competitions. I really want to see you improve. Maybe if you thought about this, and this. So we really want to come into this conflict, really want to assert ourselves in a way that's saying, hey, let's try and work on this together to try to fix the problem. A transactional analysis. It really can help sometimes when we're in conflict with the other person. We stop thinking about what it is that we want and project ourselves onto the other and say, why is it that this person is pushing this situation so hard? What is it that's not happening? What is it that I'm not giving them that they want from this conflict or from this situation that's causing them to react the way they are? What they're saying and what I'm hearing, or what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing in their response are not the same. What's going on here? Empowerment. People will feel empowered when they are encouraged to take responsibility. Removing decision-making relegates people to that of responding to environments and instruction but not engage proactively. So what we might look at here is, hey, here's maybe 3 ways we could solve this problem. Which one will work for you best? So this is also a way that we can work when we're actually in conflict with power. So what I call managing up. So we're a subordinate to a manager. So this is a way of, hey boss, look, you've given me 5 things to do with only half an hour to do it. I reckon I can only get 3 things done. Which would you like me to do? Which 3 would you like me to do? So right there, what we've done is we've kind of told them what we need and given them the responsibility to choose the response that suits them best. And maybe we can do that with someone, hey, we're in conflict here, where the judge isn't going to change their decision, but here's a couple of ways we might be able to resolve this problem. Which one would you like to go with? So we're into that section. So it's approaching the affected party. Do you have any questions there, Christine?
No, it doesn't look like it.
Okay. So just moving on to communication during conflict, and I think this section will be quite interesting to everybody. So looking at a little bit of research when it comes to communication during conflict, we found that there's a strong link between communication and conflict. So communication is the primary means by which needs are satisfied or frustrated. Communication is the primary means by which we interact with each other. Communication behaviour, both verbal and non-verbal, often creates conflict. And I'm sure we've all heard that probably about 70-75% of all communication is non-verbal. So it's our body language or the tone of our voice. Communication reflects conflict, so we're in conflict through communication. or the way we communicate leads to the conflict. Communication is the vehicle for productive or destructive management of conflict. So just how communication can cause a conflict, and it can also be the thing that resolves the conflict as well.
We do just have one
Sure.
question on communication,
Yep.
Which you may already answer in an upcoming slide, but is it best to approach face-to-face with phone call or email? Is there one that's better than the other, or does it depend on the situation?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think it would depend on the situation. It would depend on the level of conflict. It would depend on the relationship that we have with that person. I guess we might start thinking about if we're using non-face-to-face styles of conflict management, are we getting into that avoiding space? But I agree that sometimes leaving a situation as it is and being able to come back in writing at a later date can be a very effective way of dealing with conflict. In fact, Christine and I were talking about this before the session about sometimes I've found recently that I've been taking a little bit more time. I don't get a lot of nasty emails, but sometimes I'll get an email that I don't agree with, and oftentimes when I walk away and come back to it, it gives me a little bit of time to see the email a little bit differently and respond much differently than I would have when my blood was up. But I guess also sometimes when we put communication, or we put our communication in writing, we can't be interrupted. So that's another way of thinking about the way that we can communicate, but also the other person could possibly respond in the same way. So yes, I do think it depends on a number of different things. I don't think there's one that's favourable to any other. It really comes down to our own personality, the situation, and the relationship we have with that person. Any others there, Christine?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Moving on, communication skills. So the essence of conflict resolution and conflict management is the ability to communicate effectively. People who have and use effective communication skills really resolve their conflicts with greater ease and success. So it's the way we communicate is really the way that's going to help manage our conflict, whether that's in writing or whether that's through face-to-face or a phone call conversation. Making a conscious choice in how we approach conflict, we are more likely to be productive in managing and solving the problem at hand. So this is about taking that space to think about the conflict before just rushing in when our blood's up. We've just talked about how during a fight or flight response, when our blood is up, when we're anxious, the blood's rushed away from our brain, we're not thinking clearly, plus the part of our brain that thinks about how to deal with things effectively, how to analyse situations is kind of switching off, and just our survival mode is switched on. So maybe having a bit of a think about how I might want to resolve this conflict before we jump in can be very, very helpful. Greater intentionality in the way we approach conflict will likely lead to more effective conflict management. So really this is about, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to talk about. This is the problem that needs resolving, rather than like, oh, look, I think, well, not sure, can we please? So greater intentionality. This is a problem I think needs to be solved. Hey, can we get on the same page with that? So talking a little bit about verbal and non-verbal communication, one study suggests, as I've talked about before, up to 2/3 of communication is non-verbal. Another suggested 7% is verbal, 38% is vocal, 58% is facial. When verbal and non-verbal communication are incongruent, that means, like I said before, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing are two different things. The receiver of the communication instinctively questions the credibility, sincerity, and honesty of the communicator, and consequently non-verbal communication is given credence. So what they're saying here is that what I see in your body language is actually what I'm going to believe rather than what you're saying. So actions speak louder than words, as the old saying goes. So trying to get the way we are communicating with our body in line with what we're actually saying and how we're saying it can be very, very important to resolving conflict, or in fact stopping conflict from occurring in the first place. So autonomy-supportive communication, in this approach, it provides choice, rationale for tasks and opportunities for taking initiative. This is with the person we're in conflict with. So giving non-controlling feedback is very important. hey, look, what I'm watching and what I'm seeing is X, Y, and Z, rather than you've got to do it this way. Avoid controlling behaviours, which is probably a little bit more the same. The more people feel controlled, the more they want to rebel. We all hate feeling out of control. Prevent ego involvement, so try and keep our own egos out of the conflict, thinking about solving the problem rather than what I need, and I'm trying to get it my way only and every time. Acknowledge feelings and perspective. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Hey, I can really see you're upset about this. Acknowledging someone's feelings and perspective doesn't mean we have to agree with them. Hey, look, I can see you're really upset, and I really hate seeing you upset. Unfortunately, I do have to bring up this issue for discussion. Listen and acknowledge. There's a lot of stuff here, as you can see, about acknowledge as we go through. Dismissal is likely to lead to more conflict. How many times, like we said before, two people are arguing about the same thing, but only because one hasn't said to the other, hey, I can really see where you're coming from. I've got to say that I disagree, but I can really see why you're upset. So dismissing people is likely to keep the conflict going and going and going. I don't care how you feel. It's really unimportant that you think that. Just listen to what I have to say. It's not going to be helpful at all. So any questions on that, Christine?
Not at the moment.
Communication during conflict? Okay. So if there's no questions, we'll move on to assertiveness. We've got a little bit of time to go. So looking at assertiveness, it's probably something that a lot of us have a lot of difficulty with. So assertiveness is not the same as aggression, and they get mixed up very, very easily. And it actually happens in sports psychology where people are talking about aggression or assertiveness within sport, and they really get it wrong. Assertiveness, feelings of anger or antipathy resulting in hostile or violent behaviour, readiness to attack or confront. That's aggressiveness. So assertiveness refers to the honest and straightforward expression of a person's thoughts and feelings in a socially appropriate, that's probably very important, socially appropriate way that does not violate or infringe on the rights of the other. So we're not getting in the other person's way, we're just telling them what we need and what we want. Assertiveness continued. So assertiveness is a learned social skill that takes time, practice and patience to learn to do well. So it's not a skill that we're born with, but it's something that we can develop over time. It's a skill that can be practiced. And like anything that we practice, we don't get it right the first time, second time, third time. It's just something that we get better at the more we do, just like riding a horse. For every instance in which a void is left by our lack of assertiveness, others will fill that space with their own assertiveness. So we're talking, this is going back to the individualistic versus collectivistic example or question we were asked before, which is that while we're not being assertive with this person, they're going to be assertive. So anytime that we're not assertive in the situation that perhaps we need to be, the other person will continue with their assertiveness in reaction to our lack of assertiveness. We all dislike confrontation, so let's all agree on that. Confrontation is not fun, but what we're trying to find here is the best way to navigate it when it does happen. We tend to have difficulty with assertiveness due to a lack of confidence. It takes courage to be assertive. Vulnerability, none of us like feeling vulnerable. Standing up for ourselves carries with it the risk of negative consequences. Standing up to the person who's out there doing their own thing can be very, very difficult and can leave us open for attack in return. Interpersonal concerns, being hesitant to speak up for fear of hurting someone's feelings. And we don't want to break up with somebody. We don't want to leave that coach. We don't want to leave that committee, or we just don't. Or we don't want to kick somebody else off because we just don't want to hurt people's feelings. Those that are sensitive and have empathy, that is. Sometimes we have difficulty with assertiveness due to a lack of awareness. We don't learn when assertiveness is required. We might have learned throughout life just to let things go and make sure other people are happy instead of ourselves. So we might not be aware that we actually have the right to be assertive in certain situations. So intimidation, assertiveness can be difficult when we're speaking to power. Once again, maybe we're in an imbalanced relationship with somebody. Maybe we have to be assertive with a manager or a boss, or with our coach, or with a parent for that matter. Can be very intimidating to be assertive with people. Excuse me. And The last one is the socio-cultural influences, Indigenous people, Asian people, particularly to an authority figure. So, you learn that with Indigenous kids, if you, out of a sign of respect, they won't look you in the eye. Looking somebody in the eye is a sign of disrespect. So we have to be careful of these things. Asian people tend to be more collectivist in nature rather than individualistic. So, trying to get an individual within a group to be assertive can be actually threatening to the socio-cultural influences that person lives by. So understanding the culture of the person that you're talking to can also play a big part with assertiveness. So how to be assertive? We can use the DESC approach: describe, express, specify, and consequences. So when we're looking at describe, what we're saying is we need to describe the situation as we see it. So we're naming what the problem is. We paint a verbal picture of the other person's behaviour or the situation in which you're referring to. Hey, we're a committee and we're all over here making decisions together where you're off there doing your own thing. Examples. What I see happening is, when you do X, I feel Y. So we start to get into those sort of feelings when we're being assertive. We're not saying you are a so-and-so. We're saying when you do X, I feel disappointed. I feel betrayed. I feel undermined. Express. Express your feelings regarding the other person's behaviour or the situation as you've just described it. When you do X, I feel Y. So once again, to these examples, when you do or when you argue with me, it makes me feel really belittled. Can we find another way to communicate? I get angry and frustrated when you talk behind my back. So specifying when we're being assertive. Specify what changes you would like to see take place. We've outlined the behaviour. Now what I want to see is what I would like to see changed. Or, can we find a mutual way forward? How will things be? So this is how will things be if the other complies, if the other person does change their behaviour, what will the situation look like? So that's what we want to try to specify. So some examples. I prefer you give me feedback in a more constructive, less degrading manner. Or I prefer you to give me feedback one-on-one rather than when there's other people around. I would appreciate it if you did not talk behind my back. So consequences. So state the consequences the other can expect if your reasonable request is not complied with. But you must follow through. This is, once again, this is how we get change in other people's behaviour, or we don't. When it comes to this consequences thing, this is about trying to get a power imbalance back to being more balanced again. So it's about drawing a line in the sand. So if you continue to do X, the consequences of that will be Y. And if we do put something in place regards that, we have to follow through, and that's the assertiveness of it. If you continue to be off there doing your own thing rather than coming into the group and helping the group come up with mutually acceptable solutions to the problem, we're going to have to look at moving you outside of the committee. But then we must follow through if we see the action, because if we don't follow through with these, they're not threats, they're just, if you do X, I'm going to do Y. If we don't follow through, it says to the person that your behaviour is okay. And I see this so much in my practice. So some final words on assertiveness. When someone displays the behaviour changes we're looking for, acknowledge it in a positive manner. Hey, we had that conversation. I really like what you're doing there. I can see that you're really trying hard to implement what we talked about. That's fantastic. Remember, assertiveness is about standing up for ourselves. It does not guarantee that the other person will comply. However, we feel empowered by speaking up, therefore enhancing self-esteem, self-worth, and self-confidence. As assertiveness can be confronting, it is an opportunity for learning to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And this is something we talk about a lot, being comfortable in uncomfortable situations. It's kind of the concepts behind resilience, being able to keep going, being able to bounce back despite a negative outcome. Any questions there on assertiveness, Christine?
No. Oh, okay, so what's the first step of being comfortable? Difficult one.
I really think it goes back to that taking a moment to think about what it is we're about to engage in, rather than just jumping in. And I think that sometimes we can get into a bad situation there. So maybe taking that time, maybe thinking about what my goal is, what I'm trying to achieve from the conflict or the assertiveness that I'm about to get into. So I think coming from a position of strength is one way of feeling comfortable, feeling, you know, not overstepping our bounds, not trying to implement something that we're not capable of. I think can lead to feeling anxious and feeling uncomfortable. So yeah, I think really it comes from just reassuring ourselves that we have a position, that we are right to be standing up for ourselves, and being sure about that. I think goes a long way towards feeling comfortable. So knowing that we're coming from a position of strength rather than a position of weakness, or not being quite sure why we're even engaged in this conflict in the first place.
Another question, another difficult question. How can you reiterate your communicated message to a higher power when, for example, it's management that doesn't follow through? There's not much a subordinate can say, I will do such and such if you don't do, when they're, when it's a subordinate talking to management.
Yeah, it is a difficult one. I think it comes back to that wanting to be able to escalate rather than de-escalate. So, you know, maybe going in soft to begin with, and then maybe being a little bit more assertive, and then being a little bit more assertive again if we're not seeing the outcomes that we're looking for. I guess we might try to understand why management aren't implementing what it is that we're asking. Sometimes when we are subordinate, there's sometimes those more superordinate goals that managers have to try to achieve or aspire to that we might not be quite sure about. So we might be coming from a point that's over here, whereas the manager's also dealing with an issue over here and over here and over here, and maybe their decisions, we might understand their decisions a little bit more if we understand the bigger picture potentially. Sometimes, I guess, if we're in a subordinate position, sometimes we do just have to suck it up, unfortunately. And then ultimately, when it comes back to the assertiveness stuff, how important is this issue? Is it so important that if it continues, I can't be here anymore? Maybe sometimes the best option is actually to walk away if we're comfortable that we've implemented everything we possibly can along the way and done everything we possibly can, I guess. Hopefully that answers that question. That is a tough question. Any more questions there, Christine?
Don't think so. I think you've answered all of their questions. See if we come through, but I think you've answered more as we go along.
Okay, yep. And please, before the end of the seminar, if I haven't answered those couple of questions, please let me know and I'll try to answer them a little bit better. So it's coming to the last bit now. So this is about moving on after conflict, debriefing and moving on. We spoke a little bit earlier, just can't quite remember exactly what it was, but yes, making sure we do some review if we've been in conflict, and making sure that we are happy with the response that we've come up with for that conflict. So a little bit of performance analysis. You know, this is this concept called good, better, how. When I was at uni, my professor drummed this into us because, you know, as a sports psychologist, we are in a performance role. So rather than doing a bit of, you know, this is what you did wrong, this is what you did right, we always want to look at, a lot of people are very critical when they're giving feedback. We want to look at, what did I do well? So even if we're looking at a conflict, you know, any conflict, try to look at what we did well. What did we do good? And we want to make sure that we praise that, because we want to maintain our strengths and work on our weaknesses. So also what we could do better. So not necessarily this is what you did wrong, or this is what is wrong with you, or this is what you need to fix. So what's a couple of things we could do better? We can look at one thing. We can say, you know, I did one thing good. There's one thing I could do better and how I could do that better. Or we could say three things. These are three things I did well, three things I could do better, and this is how I'm going to improve those three things. So I really like this technique, because what it does is it not only tells us what we could have done better, but it comes up with a how could I have done it better? What can I do better next time to give myself a greater chance of success? Notice I didn't say perfect or be absolutely right. gives us the greatest opportunity for success. So when we're giving the feedback, we can say, give us your good, better, how, or I'll give you my good, better, how. So we can see it at 360 degrees. We can use the good, better, how technique. So when we want to give feedback, make sure our feedback is stated positively, that it is helpful and reasonable, and we use only 1 to 3 items only. So if anyone was watching the anxiety webinar I gave last year, or maybe earlier this year, I'm not quite sure, we talk about the 5 F's of error recovery. So this is another way. Say if we've got into conflict, we've argued with someone, it hasn't gone so well, maybe we can look at it. This is a way of moving on. This isn't about fixing it. This is about moving on. So first of all, we might need to finish whatever needs to be done. We might need to finish the event. We might need to finish packing up before we can sit down and move through a way of moving on. So we have to finish what it is that we're doing. We might have to finish the discussion. We can't just walk away potentially in the middle of it. Once it's over, once we realise that the error's over and no more damage can be done, we're going to be frustrated. So allow yourself to be frustrated. So what I'm saying is give yourself 2 seconds to be frustrated. Punch your hand, stomp your feet, swear very loudly if nobody can hear you and it's appropriate, but get that frustration out in the most effective way you possibly can. And then we start moving past the error. So what's one thing I can do better next time? That, oh, sorry. Oh. I didn't touch it. Test.
Sounds bad. It's all right.
Okay. Okay, cool. No worries. So fix is what's one thing I can fix next time to give myself that greater chance of success. So that's kind of like the better in a good, better, how. So fix is the next one. Then once we've thought about one thing we can fix next time, we've got to forgive ourselves and forget. This might mean also forgiving somebody else and forgetting what they did to be able to move on effectively. And then we've got to refocus back onto what's important. So this is a way of being able to let go of the things that go wrong, or even if it went right, and we still feel really, really queasy and uncomfortable about it, because that is quite possible too. And we could be right, we could be the rightest we've ever been in our life, but it still feels uncomfortable to be in an argument with somebody else. So first of all, we finish what we need to do, we get our frustration out the best we possibly can and the quickest we possibly can. Then we think about one thing I could have done better next time to give myself a greater chance of success under the similar circumstances. We need to forgive ourselves and forget that it happened, forgive somebody else and forget that it happened, or what they did, and then refocus on what's next. Once something's happened, we've got no more control over it. So the best thing to do is to move on to what's next. Debriefing, once everything is over, check in with each other as to how everyone is feeling. Maybe as a group we've been in conflict with somebody, maybe a number of us in a group, our committee or the event staff or the judges have had a pretty rough day. Check in with each other as to how you're feeling about what went on during the day. Go over any checklists to ensure everything has been done. Is there a policy and a procedure on dealing with conflicts, or what's the word I'm looking for? I forget what I'm looking for. When people are questioning us or putting in an appeal, that's the word I was looking for. Have we ticked everything off? We've gone through our checklists. Checklists are really good because then we know we've done everything that's necessary in that situation. Each person might describe their role. Say we're dealing with a conflict or a situation as a group. Let's just go through and debrief about what it is that we did during that. That doesn't need to have any criticism attached to it. It just allows the person to describe what they did. Maybe somebody's scribing. Maybe somebody's taking down what everybody did. Forbid there was a fatality and we had to go to a coroner, or we've had to call the police for something. Maybe everybody can get together and tell their story. That's extreme, of course, but keep a journal of learnings, kind of as I was saying before, somebody scribes, for example, and put in there what went well, what didn't go so well, what could we do better next time, what can we learn from what's happened today. Limit the time of the debrief. We don't want to be going on and on and on and on and on, but we might just say our debrief is going to last 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever it is. But we limit the time, so make sure that everybody is succinct and we're not going on and on all day. We don't want to keep going over and over and ruminating about issues. So as I said well earlier, this is the 6 steps to effective decision making. It can also be a way of putting things into place. You know, maybe if we're on that committee with the individual that's off doing their thing, the rest of us might need to come up with a way of dealing with that. So there's actually a decision making model that we can go through. I actually think this is quite effective. First of all, we need to define the problem. What is the actual issue that we're trying to solve? As we said before, 50% of people can be in argument about the same thing. They agree with the same thing. So let's be able to define the problem, and maybe by defining the problem, that can sort it out in the first place. So we define what the issue is and what outcome it is we're hoping to achieve. When we've put this contingency into place, what will things look like? What will happen? So the next step is to generate alternate solutions. So think of all the possible solutions to the problem and write them down. So we might work with a whiteboard, and then we put no judgment to any of the solutions that come up. This is a brainstorming activity. Write everything down, no matter what anybody says. Evaluate the alternatives. So now that we've got everything written down on our whiteboard, give each alternative a rating in terms of achievability, reasonableness, and known timeframes. Explore the positive and negatives of each aspect of each option. Give each option, perhaps we need to give each option a score out of 10. So maybe something's a good option, but it won't work within the time frame. So we might just give that a 1 out of 10. You know, another option might be a real 9 out of 10. Fantastic, we give that a 9 out of 10, and some have 10 out of 10s. Then once we've gone through the evaluation system, or the evaluation part of the technique, we need to select the best alternative. So having rated each alternative, select the solution that gave the highest rating to, and the solution that appears most reasonable within given time frames and achievability. Then we need to implement the plan. So put the plan into action. Right, we've all agreed that this is the way we're going to do things. This is each person's role. Bang, implementation. It's time to do that. And the last step in the decision-making effectiveness is to review and revise the plan. Okay, so we put the plan into put the plan into place. How did it go? Did it solve the problem? Do we need to consider other options? Perhaps we can implement one of the other solutions from the original list. And then once it's in place and it's pumping away, what's next? Maybe none of the solutions that we had on the list maybe circumstances have changed. So we go through the list again. So we always want to define the problem, generate alternatives without evaluating any of them, then evaluate the alternatives, select the best response, implement the plan, and then review. So it's a continuous cycle of going through when we're trying to make effective decisions and trying to solve problems. So I guess the other thing is, as I've said, when we get into conflict, we get into really wound up. We've got the fight or flight happening, our adrenaline's pumping. We need to sort of try to calm down. And also, what I might say too, is some of these techniques are very, very important before we go into conflict. So not just a reactive, but more of a management. So, okay, today is pretty heavy. My bucket's full of emotion. One more drop, it could overflow. Let's try and get some capacity in there just in case there is some conflict. So we can look at this as I'm about to go into conflict with someone. I know that Damien said that it's probably better if I do it in a nice, relaxed and controlled manner. How can I wind myself down to be in a place where I can stick to the issues and not escalate too far? I'm already feeling my blood up. How can I get it down? So take some deep breaths. There is plenty of apps out there that will help you with deep breathing. There's plenty of techniques out there. There's one that I teach with breathing with our tummy and counting in our head that keeps us in the present moment, and most people find it very effective. Mindfulness, we can use our 5 senses. Mindfulness is about being present in the present moment, in the here and now. So the past, when we're looking at negative experiences about regret, remorse, shame, and guilt, we're ruminating, I should have done this, I should have done that, and that just makes us feel awful. The future is always about anxiety. What's going to happen? What if this happens? What if that happens? And we can't actually reach into the future and do anything about it right now. But what we can do, and the only thing that we can affect, is what we do right now. If there's something we're trying to achieve in the future, it will only happen based on what we do right now. So we need to get in the present moment. One of the ways of doing that is using our 5 senses. In any particular moment, what can I see? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can I taste? What can I touch? And don't just rush through it. Really take it in. What can I see? I can see some notes up here. I can see 2 computer screens. There's a telephone, my water bottle, and a keyboard. What can I hear? I can hear the sound of the computer's fan engine going around. I can hear that, plus I can hear the sound of my own voice. What can I smell? Not a lot at the moment. What can I taste? I'm a bit dry, so I have some water. And what can I touch? I can feel the smoothness of the laminate on the desk in front of me. So that can really help us to bring us into the present, into the here and now. Take a walk around the complex. Take a walk around the block. If I'm out at a competition site, maybe I just take a big walk around the whole complex and have a good think about how I'm going to approach. Come from a position of strength in this potential conflict I'm about to go into. Give some space to give myself a real good chance to wind down and relax and think about what it is that I'm trying to achieve here. Once again, just going back to what we talked about before, debrief with a trusted other, not someone who's going to run away and tell everybody what we said. Write down the experience and file it away. It's an enormously powerful activity to write something down, write someone a letter, write someone an email, but don't send it. Can be a very, very powerful way of doing it. I tend to use the notes section on my phone a lot. I just find that once you've written something down, you don't need to keep ruminating about it, because anytime you want to in the future, you've got a record of it. And probably 9.999 times out of 10, we don't go back to it because we've actually been able to purge what it is that we're feeling. And the last one is a pleasant thought. Taking ourselves away to a favourite place or a favourite activity in our mind, just doing some visualisation about that. And once again, thinking about our 5 senses when we're on the beach or in that really pleasant place of what can I see, what can I hear, what can I smell, what can I taste, what can I touch? Is the water pounding? Is it lapping gently? Is it windy? Is it not? How's the sand? Can I feel the sand between my toes, etc., etc.? Taking ourselves away to a pleasant place can be very, very relaxing. And once again, with the mindfulness techniques, there are many, many apps out there that will take you through guided meditation, guided mindfulness that you can just put on for 5 or 10 minutes to help yourself relax before you're about to go and do something that might be a bit heavy. I've got a few people that have some social anxiety. They've used some of these apps just in the shopping centre when it's all got a bit much, sit on a bench, put in their headphones, close their eyes, nobody knows what they're doing, and they just go through this mindfulness and this meditation, and they're able to go and continue their shopping. So, any questions on the debriefing, Christine? No? Okay. So we come to the end. Sorry I'm a little bit late, but just a summary of what we've gone through tonight. We've defined conflict. We've looked at some conflict management and resolution, what they are, and the difference between the two. Management is just trying to manage a conflict, whereas resolution is ending it. Conflict management styles, different ways we can approach conflict. We looked at some ways of engaging the person we're in conflict with, hopefully trying to resolve problems together. We've also looked at how we might communicate effectively during conflict, and hopefully some of the questions that were asked, which were very good questions and have very tough answers. And of course, there's no easy way of ending conflict. We're always going to feel uncomfortable with that. We've also looked at some assertiveness, which is also a way of communicating during conflict, and then we've looked at how to move on from conflict, how to debrief afterwards, and how we might relax ourselves when it comes to the end of a conflict or before going into a conflict. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. There's some details there. If anyone wants to get hold of me, you can either get me on those details or get in touch with Christine or Equestrian Queensland. I'm more than happy to answer emails or come out and do presentations. But yeah, happy to answer any questions if anybody's got some.
I think that's it.
Oh, okay. Well, I hope everybody got something out of that and it was enjoyable. And if you have any questions for me, please send them through. Thank you.
Thank you.